Well, Valentora, after months of preparation, I think we're finally ready to start our YouTube career. Yep, I think it's finally time to show the world what we're able to do. With a commentary, that's what. So let me just run through the 2016 commentator checklist real quick. Let's see. A background devoid of black borders, an original avatar, an opening skit, an engaging intro with effort put into it. This one's a bit odd. Lack of a voice changer? Great! Now the only thing I'm missing is some commentary material. Perfect! Greetings, online travelers. I'm Aeron Tempest, and welcome to the first episode of Digital Dissections. Before we begin, allow me to introduce our current specimen. Meet Dobbs. He's a PokeTuber with approximately 312 subscribers at the time of this video's production. On October 3rd, 2016, he released a top 10 video titled Top 10 Hilariously Overpowered Pokemon. Its success led Dobbs to create a sequel top 10 video on November 24th, 2016 titled Top 10 Hilariously Weak Pokemon. It is that top 10 video that is currently on the chopping block for today's video. So without further ado, let's charge ahead.
You're a hero to us all! Oh, come now, little old me a hero? Surely you jesting!
Exploding at number 10, we have Electrode. Now imagine yourself, sitting by a tree. It's an apple tree. And then all of a sudden an apple drops on your head and you explode! Meet Electrode, where every moment could be his last. Stated from his Pokédex, it stores electric energy under very high pressure. It often explodes with little or no provocation. So that means this miserable Pokemon could be destroyed by a splashing Magikarp, because it only takes one little jab in order to trigger its explosion.
So, Electrode's weak because it can explode at any time. Okay. First, I would like to bring up the fact that Pokemon that learn Explosion, or Self-Destruct for that matter, do not die when they use the move. They only faint. Second, ignoring that, Explosion is the most powerful move in the game, with a base power of 250, so whatever gets caught in that blast is going to take quite a load of damage, even if the Pokemon dies afterwards. Third, say if you wanted to argue that Electrode possesses the weakest explosion in the game because of its base attack of 50. I still wouldn't be behind that because the weakest explosion belongs to Voltorb and Solosis with their base attack of 30. Fourth, it's not like the only move Electrode can learn is Explosion, despite what his Pokédex entry says. So why is it the main crux of your argument for why Electrode is placed here?
Speaking of explosions, this move is actually Electrode's signature move. I mean, I'd rather have Tackle as my signature move over exploding and killing myself.
Pardon my nitpick, but Explosion is not Electrode's signature move. Not only does the Golem line, which also appeared in Gen 1 by the way, can learn Explosion via level up, but Explosion is a TM in generations 1, 4, 5, and 6. Electrode is the most iconic user of Explosion, sure, but Explosion is not its signature move.
On top of that, its design is pretty weak. One of the weakest from the original Pokemon. It's literally a Pokeball turned upside down. But hey, you cannot love the expression on Electrode's face. I mean, remember from Pokemon Snap?
Yes, yeah, wonderful!
Here's the thing though, Electrode and its pre-evolved form are both mimics. You know, those things that appear in every RPG ever made. Do you criticize a mimic for looking like a commonplace item, like a chest in a dungeon, or a Pokeball in Pokemon? No, because that's the point. Wait a minute, why even bring up its design? You don't bring up design in any of your other entries, making this a rather weak justification.
Flying at number 9, we have Mega Garchomp.
What?
Now, of course, Garchomp is one of the strongest Pokemon in the competitive game, but Mega Garchomp, on the other hand, is what happens when you take a great Pokemon and make it mediocre at best.
So if you claim that Mega Garchomp is mediocre at best when compared to Garchomp and Garchomp alone, mind you, how can you consider it hilariously weak on its own merits? More importantly, why is Mega Garchomp above Electrode? Seriously, you're implying that Mega Garchomp is weaker than Electrode, are you daft?
When Garchomp Mega evolves, its speed stat gets lowered, from a great 102 to a slightly above average 92, which leaves it vulnerable to be revenge killed by Pokemon that would normally outspeed. Not to mention that there's loads of Pokemon out there with a base speed stat higher than 92, which leaves Mega Garchomp to the disadvantage.
Honestly, I can't in good faith dismiss Mega Garchomp's massive attack buff and improved defenses just because of a 10-point reduction in speed. Surely speed's important, don't get me wrong, but it's not everything.
Another thing that really puts a dent in Garchomp when it Mega Evolves is that it loses a very useful ability, Rough Skin, and is replaced by a very situational ability called Sand Force, which is basically a life form that only works with ground, rock, and steel type moves, while being in a sandstorm. So in order for Mega Garchomp to be of any use, it needs to have a set up Pokemon like Tyranitar to help activate its ability. But the hilarity of this weakened Pokemon is that regular Garchomp holding a life orb actually slightly does more damage than Mega Garchomp, and on top of that it has better speed and a more useful ability.
Let's say that Garchomp with a Life Orb deals slightly more damage than Mega Garchomp. Okay, Mega Garchomp does slightly less damage, but that's all it is. A slight loss. And it doesn't lose 10% of its HP like Garchomp with a Life Orb would, meaning it has more longevity, especially when you factor in its increased bulk. Also, you need to take into account that under a Sandstorm, its ability gives it a bonus attack boost to Ground-type moves, which already has Stab, by the way, and Steel moves, which can help it deal with those pesky Fairy types.
To put it simple, Mega Garchomp is a straight up downgrade to regular Garchomp, with only a very small Dechet, while losing a very important speed stat, which is why some people think that Mega Garchomp is actually worse than Mega Ardino, but that's a topic for another video.
I feel like Mega Garchomp is not a straight downgrade like you claim, it's just different. Speaking of Fairy types, Mega Garchomp worse than Mega Audino? Are you joking? For a start, how can you compare the two? Mega Garchomp serves as a wall breaker, and Mega Audino serves best as an offensive or defensive pivot. Even then, comparing them seems a bit silly, since you're arguing a Pokemon with a base stat total of 700 is weaker than a Pokemon with a base stat total of 545. Finally, now that explains why you put Garchomp above Electrode.
Teleporting you at number 8, we have Sabrina's Abra from Pokemon Yellow. Now this Abra is a straight up failure because it sets up Sabrina's team for a disaster. The only two moves this Abra knows is Teleport and Flash, which doesn't impact the player at all. Now if you didn't know, there was a glitch back in Generation 1 where the item X Accuracy not only improved your accuracy, but it gave you perfect accuracy. Knowing this, you could bring all havoc with a Nidoking ignoring Horn Drill because you could literally one-hit everything that you came across that you outsped.
Hold on a second. Why are you using Nidoking as an example here? If I'm not mistaken, he was on your hilariously overpowered list at number 8. Don't you think that using a Pokemon you consider to be hilariously overpowered is a bad idea to prove a Pokemon is incredibly weak? That's like me saying, gosh, that Shinx is so weak, guys, it could be easily defeated by Mega Rayquaza. How pathetic is that?
Now getting back to Sabrina, it is well known that her Pokemon are pretty fast, so Horn Drill would have no effect. To bypass this, you have to do absolutely nothing because Sabrina will allow you to set up because for some reason she decides to use Abra as her starting Pokemon. Just give her Nidoking a couple XPs and that X accuracy, and you're all set to get the easiest gym badge you will ever receive.
Alright, let's examine your scenario a bit further. You're getting onto Abra's case for an element outside its control, the player's X accuracy exploit for one-hit KO moves and the X speeds, meaning that even with this little game breaker of yours, you still have to do a little bit of work to sweep the team with one-hit KO moves. I think your scenario would be better if you just omitted Nidoking and replaced it with a Pokemon with stat boosting moves that could then be used to sweep the team, showcasing how weak Abra is without using cheap exploits. Actually, now that I think about it, why isn't Sabrina's Abra higher on the list, since it's incapable of doing any sort of damage to the player, unlike anything else on this list? The worst it can do is waste the player's PP since it can spam Flash. So what gives?
And just in general, Abra is a pretty weak Pokemon, because it can only learn Teleport. I mean, Magikarp can learn more moves of this Pokemon naturally by leveling up. Not until it evolves at level 16 does it become a viable Pokemon. But in order to even get to that point, you need to babysit it with an XP share, which can be tough because you usually don't receive an XP share until later in the game.
Excuse me, I believe this segment is on Sabrina's Abra from Pokemon Yellow, not Abra in general. Okay. Yeah, it may be true that Magikarp learns more moves by leveling up, but you forgot one thing. TMs exist. Abra knows far more TM moves than Magikarp's grand total of none. Furthermore, for a first stage evolution in Gen 1, that special of 105 is nothing to sneeze at. Ignoring TMs, you don't need an EXP share to evolve it, just switch out Abra and let it get half the experience points like you would do for any other Pokemon before getting the EXP share.
Crawling at number 7, we have the unknown bug Pokemon.
Wait, who? What? Where? Why?
Now, in the very first chapter of the original Pokemon Pocket Monsters manga, Red and his new Pokemon, Clefairy, come across a group of wild Pokemon including the legendary Mewtwo. Mewtwo and his gang of wild Pokemon taunt Red by calling them Weaklings. In order to defend his honor, Red orders Clefairy to attack one of the nearby bug Pokemon. It seems that it only takes Clefairy one attack to defeat this unknown Pokemon, which allows Red to capture it. Now, according to Bulbapedia, the only known information about this Pokemon is that it's supposedly very weak. Which is kind of funny because even Magikarp has more recorded information on it besides being very weak.
So what I've gathered is that it has little data regarding it, but it's apparently very weak from the little data that was recorded. So how can you quantify this Pokemon's weakness in comparison to other Pokemon on this list? Looks can be deceiving after all. I mean, if a Pachirisu can tank a Draco Meteor, I think writing Pokemon off based off of limited data is not a good idea. Heck, for all we know, this unknown bug Pokemon could be one of those newfangled Ultra Beasts I'm hearing about. Considering what you put on the list later, I feel like I'm gonna have a hard time believing that the Pokemon after are gonna be weaker than this choice.
We win!
Remember, with Pokemon, you can't predict anything!
Climbing at number 6, we have the old Trico from the Pokemon anime. Now in the Pokemon Advanced Generation series, in episode 7, Ash and his friends come across a Trico colony led by an old looking Trico. This Trico had wrinkles and a hunched back along with all the key factors of being an old Pokemon. With this, it brings up an interesting question. Does evolution not relate to the aging process of a Pokemon? Ash actually catches one of the Tricos from the same colony and eventually evolves it into a Sceptile, which indirectly disproves the connection between age and evolution. So really, what's the deal with this old Trico? Along with that, what's the point of evolution if it's not an aging process?
What's the point of evolution if it's not an aging process? To make Pokemon stronger? I don't know. Even if it wasn't, when was it ever implied that evolution comes with age alone? There are so many different methods of evolving Pokemon, stones, trading, happiness, being held upside down, that you would be hard-pressed to claim that aging is the sole factor of evolving. And that's before we start getting into how Mega Evolutions work.
The only conclusion that I can come up with is that this Trico was just so weak that it wasn't ever able to reach a level of evolution. Kinda like Yamcha from Dragon Ball Z. But anyways, it's kinda sad because the Trico that Ash catches literally evolves twice within a few months of being caught. Maybe it's just a biological instinct to help a Pokemon defend itself when fighting predators. I mean, some Pokemon can shoot Hyper Beams out of their mouths after all, but apparently this Trico was just so weak that it couldn't evolve. Which is why I put him at number 6 for this list.
You are basing this off an assumption. May I remind you that pre-evolved Pokemon tend to learn moves before their fully evolved counterparts, so that Elder Trico might be packing some powerful moves in its arsenal.
But Aeron, the only move that Trico could learn via level up that's worth having is Gengar Drain!
Even then, this is the anime.
Bulbasaur! Whirlwind!
Not only that, this is the same anime that would later introduce the Thunder Plot Armor, so anything goes. Besides that, you're implying that Trico couldn't evolve because it was too weak to do so. Well, one could argue that it didn't want to evolve. Maybe it has an Evastone hidden somewhere. Who knows? You surely don't, Mr. Assumption.
Floating at number 5, we have Jigglypuff from Smash Bros. 4. Now, most Smash 4 tier lists, Jigglypuff usually finds herself as the worst ranked character in the game.
First off, I don't think placing a Pokemon from a fighting game for being the lowest on the tier list in that game is a very strong argument. It goes without saying that tier lists are not official and change over time. Besides, how can you compare the weakness of a playable character in a fighting game to the weaknesses of a Pokemon in, say, the anime or the manga, when you have to take into account player skill, their playstyle, and dumb luck? You know, there is a Pokemon that you could consider to be hilariously weak in Smash that doesn't appear on this list. You know who it is? Goldeen. It literally can't do any damage. You even joked about Goldeen in your intro. Yeah, this entry might have proved that Jigglypuff may be weak compared to the other fighters, but is it weaker than a Pokemon that cannot do any damage? No? Then why not put Goldeen on the list instead? Speaking of which, how is Jigglypuff weaker than Sabrina's Abra?
Swimming at number 4, we have the legendary Pokemon Phione. Now back in the day when I first discovered this Pokemon, the first thought that went through my mind was, what's the point of this Pokemon? It's basically a clone of Manaphy. Some say Phione was only created because Game Freak wanted a legendary Pokemon that was capable of breeding. But that doesn't really make any sense because Phione can't even evolve into Manaphy. She's literally just a lesser form of that Pokemon. In every possible way, in fact, Phione is weaker than Manaphy. On top of that, she's even heavier than Manaphy, which will cause her to take more damage when going against moves that use weight as a factor. So basically, we have a lesser, weaker version of a legendary Pokemon.
Okay, so Phione is weaker than Manaphy. Cool. How does that make it weak in and of itself? Oh, Phione takes more damage from Grass Knot than Manaphy.
Oh, the horror!
In all seriousness, from what you described, Phione is just mediocre. And last time I checked, being mediocre does not make you hilariously weak, leaving me wondering why it's even on the list and how it got this high. I mean, how is a legendary Pokemon, even if it's mediocre, weaker than the unknown bug Pokemon? Also, how is it weaker than Sabrina's Abra?
Pikachu, use Thunderbolt!
Growing at number 3, we have Sunkern. Now what's the top 10 weakest Pokemon list without including the Pokemon with the lowest stat total? That's right, you heard that correctly. Sunkern has the lowest stat total out of all the 802 Pokemon. With a whopping 180, Sunkern has a base stat of 30 across the board. But not to worry, her stats in each category isn't the lowest. For HP, Shedinja holds the crown for having the lowest out of all the Pokemon at a frightening 1. For attack and defense, Happening and Chansey take that place with a chilling 5. For special attack, V-Bats, Bonsly, and Circle are tied for last with a smacking 10. For special defense, Magikarp, Weedle, Caterpie, Igglypuff, Carvanha, and surprisingly Deoxys' attack form are tied with a staggering 20. And finally for speed, Munchlax and Shuckle are tied with a shocking 5.
This is filler, plain and simple. There's no point in showing who's got the lowest in each stat, because it doesn't explain how Sunkern, the subject of this list, is weak. Instead, all this trivia does is raise new questions such as, why aren't any of these Pokemon on the list? What does this have to do with Sunkern having the lowest base stat total? What's the point of even mentioning these other Pokemon? Do you only have Pokemon Stadium footage of Sunkern? How is Sunkern weaker than Sabrina's Abra?
Stomping at number 2, we have Regigigas from the Japanese versions of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Now, like we all know, Regigigas is the trio master of the 3 Regis of the Hoenn region. Tied for 10th for having the highest base stat total out of all the Pokemon, one would think that this trio master is a force not to be reckoned with. That's until you find out about Slow Start, the complete nerf of this monster. Slow Start is unfortunately Regigigas' signature ability, which cuts his attack and speed for 5 turns. On top of that, Regigigas was purposely not given Protect so that the trainer couldn't avoid 3 out of the 5 turns of being hit. Even with its insane nerf, Regigigas only has Drain Punch for self-healing, which is a really tough move to utilize with Slow Start when in a singles battle. Now you're probably wondering why I said the Japanese version of Diamond and Pearl, specifically when counting down this list. According to the Bubblepedia, in the Japanese versions of Diamond and Pearl, Regigigas stat changes from Slow Start would not change even when the moves like Skill Swap or Worry Seed was used, which put a huge handicap on this trio master.
Oh no, you're stuck with Regigigas' Slow Start debuff in that particular version. There are still methods around it. For example, give Regigigas some leftovers, use Substitute, spam Double Team, and voila! If you don't want to be total cancer, get rid of Double Team and just Baton Pass Cosmic Power and Rock Polish onto it. Or you could use Thunder Wave, Confused Ray, or Toxic to give your opponent a hard time during those first 5 turns. I may not be in the competitive scene all that much, but I don't think Regigigas is impossible to work around. I mean, after all, Pachirisu won a tournament.
Not surprisingly, it was confirmed by the developers that Slow Start was an attempt to balancing out Regigigas. In terms of the Pokemon lore, there really isn't any history on how Regigigas obtained this ability. But not to worry, if you're curious on how you obtain Slow Start, I did a storytelling video on how Regigigas could have obtained this ability. Just check out the video shown on the screen now or down below in the description.
Actually, there is an in-game reason why Regigigas would have Slow Start as an ability. Consider where you typically find Regigigas, either immobilized as a statue in a temple or a cave, for who knows how long. Suddenly awakening Regigigas from such a long period of immobilization would cause it to take some time for it to get going, wouldn't you think? Also, get your irrelevant plugs out of here right now, there are children present in this vicinity. Now, if you'll excuse me. Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. If you would like to check out my DeviantArt page where I post absolutely nothing of importance, then you can do so by checking out this annotation right here.
But anyways, for the fact that Regigigas literally had the same attack as Pikachu for 5 turns, I chose Regigigas for number 2 on this list.
Hey, you know what has a lower base stat total than a Pikachu? Sunkern.
And for number 1, the most hilariously weak Pokemon, in my opinion, is Pichu from Super Smash Bros. Melee. Pichu was definitely a surprise when unlocking all the characters for the first time. No one expected that this pre-evolution mouse would make it into such a prestigious game, and that's exactly what Sakurai, the creator of Smash, wanted. Being an intentionally inferior clone of Pikachu, Pichu is defined as a joke character, with many significant weaknesses. On top of that, Pichu racks up damage every time it attacks, making Smash Bros. Melee the only game to stay true to Pichu's Pokédex entry, where it describes farming itself when using his own electricity. To make it worse, Sakurai says so himself that Pichu was intentionally made to be the worst character on the roster. But honestly, that makes it even better because defeating an opponent with a top tier character, even if it's one stock, is straight up humiliation, and nothing can beat that. Surprisingly enough, Pichu on most Smash tier lists is the 3rd worst in the game, Kirby and Bowser being below him.
Again, like your Jigglypuff segment, why place a playable Pokemon from Smash when Goldeen exists? Heck, Smash Goldeen would be a perfect candidate for number 1, all things considered. Hey, hold on just a minute, why is Melee Pichu above Jigglypuff from Smash 4 if it isn't even the worst character in the game, according to tier list anyway, unlike Jigglypuff? Moreover, your footage shows someone wrecking shop in battle, meaning that Pichu isn't as weak as you're making it out to be. Finally, and this is the important part, how is Pichu from Melee weaker than Sabrina? So after this, Dobbs finishes the Pichu entry and then does the standard YouTube self-promotion stuff, so here would be a good place to pull the plug. Concluding statements. I am honestly baffled by this top 10. Like the list that came before this, the entries are ordered so haphazardly I wonder if there was any thought put into the order of this list. Seriously, in what realm is a Regigigas weaker than a Sunkern by any stretch of the imagination? Furthermore, you're incredibly inconsistent. You picked these entries by different standards and definitions of the term weak, from design to assumptions to alleged signature moves to direct comparisons to stronger Pokemon, etc, etc. This is not okay, bro. Bear in mind that the word weak has about 16 definitions and connotations. If you don't clearly establish what you mean by weak, how will anybody be able to watch your list without feeling confused at some point? My advice is to consider defining your criteria for a top 10 list and sticking to that definition as you rank your entries. Or bar that, consider removing the top 10 aspect and present it as 10 hilariously weak Pokemon, or something like that. Fix these issues and I think you'll be an even greater Poketuber for it. Well, that's over, so, what next? Well, I guess that makes sense, but I don't have any more material. Like that's gonna happen. Well, considering our current budget, your options for a vocal chip are either a black man with a falsetto or a low-quality text-to-speech program. Which do you prefer? That's what I thought. Hello again, welcome to the part of the video where I shamelessly plug my stuff. If you like this video and want to continue following my content, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. I also have a DeviantArt page which can be found right here. Since this is my first outing, I would appreciate it if you'd left me feedback in the comment section below, or a commentary if you so choose. How else will I improve? Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I bid you farewell.